Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with Exemplify Health Center, your Wellness Way affiliate, right here in Yorkville, Illinois. Happy Monday evening, everyone. And as promised, I know I went live on Saturday. I'm going to be talking to you about mold and why you might have a lot of unexplained symptoms. And I know that we had a lot of people ask about this, and yes, I do help people who are having mold issues, and in fact a lot of it is just based on necessity more than anything else. It does become a little bit complex and a little bit harder than just nutrition and food allergies and things like that, because you have something that is absolutely assaulting the immune system. So I'm going to give you a little bit more in-depth knowledge and a little bit more clarity when it comes to mold. And no, I don't have a protocol for you as well. And one of the biggest reasons why is there's a lot of different things that are going on that it's involving some of the symptoms that people have with mold. And so it can get a little bit tricky. And anyone who says that they have a mold protocol, please run from them because there's a lot of different gears that are moving when it comes to mold. But I'm going to explain to you during this video, and there's this live video, why maybe a lot of it can get missed and why a lot of people are working on specific things when it comes to their health. They may be actually working with a quote-unquote natural practitioner, maybe with their medical doctor, just not getting better. I'm going to give you some pretty awesome clinical examples. And also, if you do suspect that there is some issues with mold, some of the first steps that you can take that everyone should be taking, some of the first things that I advise people to do really before we start getting into deep as far as mold and with the symptoms, and then handling the actual mycotoxin removal from the body. So guys, if you're watching this right now and you have a lot of unexplained symptoms, I'm going to explain those symptoms to you in just a second, or if you know someone who is suffering with some unexplained symptoms, because it will hide it as other symptoms. And I'm going to explain to you why, because of the inflammatory reaction that takes place specifically in a response to mycotoxins, okay? And if you guys are watching right now, I already see that people are joining, already saying hello. Thank you, as always, for saying hello. And if you are joining us and you haven't said hello, please say hello. Please let me know where you are watching from. And I know that we have people from all over the continental United States, actually Alaska, even in Southeast Asia, in Europe, and then also many followers that are in Canada. So Canada, I hope you guys are doing as well as can be expected. So let's go over mold, but before we do that, guys, I think once you understand the immune system, it will help you to understand mold a whole heck of a lot better. And guys, that's why if you are in the Chicagoland area, please go to the top of this page. Please register for Make Immune System Strong Again, guys. We have not done any specialty talks in our office this whole entire year because we've been so busy. We may resume doing that now that we have a little bit of help with Dr. Brian doing a wonderful job in the office. But this is actually the only talk besides the inflammation talk that we are pretty much going to be doing this year. And guys, once you understand the immune system, once you understand how the immune system works, how it is barriers, innate and then adaptive immune system, how we do everything backwards, especially when it comes to healthcare. Once you guys understand that, you'll understand why a lot of quote-unquote medical procedures, you know exactly what I'm talking about, are completely backwards and do not even follow the rules of science and physiology. And in fact, I'm also going to be updating with some research over just the last 2 to 3 weeks in regards to the COV, et cetera, gene therapeutic, and how devastating it is, because you were the guinea pig, and now we're getting the data back on pregnant women, on people who are immunocompromised, people with autoimmunity, and the results are not good. And we're going to explain to you from a physiological perspective why that is, guys. And I think it's so important that even as a layperson that you have can be able to provide an eloquent response even to your doctor, and one that makes sense and one they cannot argue with. And in fact, when they cannot argue the actual facts, then what they'll do instead, and this happens to me all the time, is they will actually attack your profession, or they will attack the person and not actually attack the argument. And if you're attacking the person, or if you are attacking a profession versus the actual facts, you are a very small person, in my opinion, all right? And you've already lost the argument. So guys, all you have to do is go up to the top of the page, right up there. You can register. This is an in-person event, Chicagoland area. Make immune system strong again. I know that we have consistently seen people register. And so by, I believe, Thursday will be the last time to register for this event. I know a lot of people will ask, are you going to have a virtual option? Maybe. I'm not for sure, guys, because if we do a virtual option, there will be, it will require some payment just because of the software that we have to use. And so we've always had a lot of people who have said, oh, I want a virtual option. And then if they pay a nominal fee, then they're out the door. So guys, this actually supports our use and our time of having to use extra software in order to be able to do this, because doing this online probably would get shut down pretty quickly, which is why we'll have to use different software, webinar software for this especially, okay? So we'll consider that. If we do, it will be next week or possibly the week afterwards. But if you are interested in a virtual option or a webinar in regards to this talk, please, please, please say that you are interested, and we will have some kind of nominal fee for it, because the software that we have to use costs about $1,000 per year to actually use, and I'm hanging on to this software right now really for no reason, all right? So hopefully, guys, that makes some sense to you. So let's talk about that, but this is actually one of the things I'm going to talk about at the Make Immune System Strong Again, because we're going to talk about here's how the immune system works, here's how you build the immune response, but not only that, we're going to talk about updated research on the COV, et cetera, vaccine, why there have been so many injuries with it. And guys, this is actually a case report. I actually posted this on my personal profile on Facebook, and Facebook put a warning on there like, you better be careful or you're going to get dinged. Guys, this actually comes from the Journal of Vaccines, actually published October 1st, 2022, so just 2 days ago. And this was in the Journal of Vaccines. Here's what they said. It's a case report, multifocal necrotizing encephalitis and myocarditis after mRNA vaccination against COVID-19. So here was an individual that actually died of encephalitis and also of myocarditis. And when they did an autopsy, because the people requested an autopsy, they did not find the COVID-19 vaccine or the COVID-19 actual viral capsule. What they found instead was it was riddled with spike protein. And at that event, I'm actually going to explain to you physiologically why that is and why it has been a complete and utter, not only as a failure, but actually very dangerous as well. Who says so? Statistics. Who says so? Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Guys, we're just reporting facts. And when you try to suppress facts, that means you have something nefarious that you are hiding. That's probably why we can't actually do that talk on Facebook. So, but this actually comes at a reporting a case study. And guys, I want you to know something, is that the amount of reporting it versus the amount of instances that is actually happening is massively underreported. We'll talk more about that at that event. So have no fear. We are going to talk about mold today. What you guys are looking at right now is a test. And in fact, this is called an Ermey test. Ermey stands for Environmental Readiness Mold Index. Now, this is actually a very viable test. This is one of the best tests you can do in order to look at your environmental exposure within a house, within your workplace, within a building, okay? And so Ermey test, Viral Relative Moldiness Index, basically when you do this test at home, there's directions on how to do it. I'm not going to explain to you why or how you do it, but it will come back and it will do testing on the actual types of mold that are present. Now, we're not talking about environmental mold and things that your mold index outside is really high. What we're talking about is water damage mold caused by water damage. So here's what's interesting is I know I did a live on Monday or on Saturday, and we have had an on and off leak in our roof of our office building. Anytime it rained a lot, we would get leaking. It would come down into the ceiling tiles. And, so we would have to replace the ceiling tiles. And I would say, hey, please fix the leak, right? And I said, yeah, we fixed it. And then another heavy rain, we would see it start to come back in again. And so, we would always thought that the leak would always have been fixed. And then a couple of weeks ago when it rained a lot where our office is at, we actually had tremendous amount of water actually come into the ceiling towers, so much the ceiling towers in a certain part of our office actually collapsed. And so I said, all right, we have a leak. Please fix this again. And lo and behold, they have. Very gracious about it. But I said, you know what, let's just go ahead and let's test for any kind of water damage mold that's taken place. So we did the Ermey test. And when we did it, we were actually in the third quartile, which says medium to high relative mold. And the Ermey test showed that our levels at 3.7 out of a possible 20 or above. So not absolutely terrible, but enough to actually take a look at and to work on fixing obviously the source of the problem, but then also making sure that you're killing off any spores that are riding on the coattails of dust and things like that within the office. So we were able to get it fixed. We were able to do some mold remediation with some all-natural types of things using a company. We didn't do it ourselves. But at 3.7, what they actually recommend from the early test is further investigation may be needed to determine the source of the mold if occupants have been reactive, sensitized, or genetically predisposed or otherwise immunocompromised. I want you to pay attention to this right here. Genetically predisposed or reactive or sensitized, meaning they've had previous exposure to mold. So the people who are going to be really, really bothered by this are people who genetically cannot remove mycotoxin from the body, which is going to be about 25%. But not only that, if you've ever heard of this CRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and in fact, this is what I'm going to describe, because there's people who say, oh, I have this chronic inflammatory response that comes out of nowhere, or I have mast cell syndrome, or all of these different things. And I want you to think immune, and I want you to think of the possibility of mold. So we'll actually retest this again, probably within about a week to 10 days, and see if the actual levels of mold from water damage mold are actually going down. But I actually, being exposed to it for 10 to 11, 12 hours a day, it really did affect me. But not only that, not as much for people in for 20 or 30 minutes at all. And we kept people away from where most of the water damage had actually taken place. So if you look at this right here, these are considered biotoxins, okay? Biotoxins can be toxins that are coming from living things. One of them is mold. Another one can actually be Lyme disease as well. That's why a lot of symptoms with mold and Lyme actually go hand in hand. So when you look at this, I know that you can actually look this up, guys, online, but this actually comes from Dr. Richie Shoemaker, MD, who is considered probably one of the best when it comes to mold and understanding the chronic inflammatory response that actually comes from mold. But guys, if you look at this, and you can see all of the different types of symptoms that someone can have, not only if they are currently getting exposed to mold, but in some people who cannot remove the mold toxin from the body, or can't have an antigen type response, cannot produce an antibody response to the antigen of mycotoxins. Okay, so I want you to think of this. The first thing that you have is you're going to breathe in mold. Some of them actually can come directly into the gastrointestinal system. This would be from food, like a lot of grains, and then also in coffee, for example, even in peanuts. Most of what you're actually seeing is it's breathed in through the sinuses, through the nose, or through the lungs. We're actually supposed to, most of it should be coming in through the sinuses, because we're supposed to actually breathe mostly through our nose. If you've ever heard of a mouth breather, and they actually use that term derogatory, the people who chronically have allergies and stuffed up nose, they have to breathe through their mouth instead. So if you have a biotoxin and you remove yourself from the source, in most people, guys, biotoxins are either removed from the blood by the liver or attacked by the immune system, broken down and excreted harmlessly. And people don't have the right immune response genes, however, biotoxins can remain in the body indefinitely, okay? So here is actually some of the symptoms that you can have. One of the biggest things that it actually will cause is it will cause an immune system type response. And a lot of it is what happens within the brain. So within the hypothalamus, with vasointestinal peptide, melanocyte stimulating hormone, So these hormones start to get affected. And one of the biggest things that you will see within the hypothalamus is reduced melanocyte stimulating hormone. So that is a precursor to melatonin. So you start to have issues with sleep disturbance. You can have problems with chronic pain. You can have problems with gastrointestinal issues. You can have other infections start to take place. So prolonged illnesses, changes with your cortisol, and your adrenal corticotropin hormone levels. So it will actually cause an increase in cortisol, but over time you will start to become very adrenally fatigued. It will cause problems with your hormones, reduced androgens. Ladies, testosterone. Men, also testosterone. It can also cause problems with antidiuretic hormone. And so this leads to thirst, frequent urination. What's interesting is if someone has a lot of mycotoxin, one of the things that they can do is they actually are people who shock themselves quite a bit. So you can do kind of a test to see if they do have, in fact, mold toxicity, and go ahead and go barefoot or with socks on, rub your feet on the carpeting and touch something or touch a person. People who are constantly shocking themselves actually can be indirectly related to mold because of specific hormone changes, specifically because you're chronically dehydrated, okay? So you will also see inflammation-related symptoms, high cytokines, high inflammatory things. This is why these people are always inflamed, and they're going to have immune system issues, okay? So basically what you're seeing is you're seeing all of these different types of responses that it's affecting hormones, affecting the gastrointestinal system, it's affecting urination, it's affecting the kidneys, it's affecting the brain, it's affecting sleep, and all these things then start to get affected, and now you see even having adrenal fatigue, and all these things get affected so much that you start to see other body systems that are affected, which is why if you go to the doctor and they have gastrointestinal issues, they're not going to put the whole thing together and say maybe what you're having is a systemic toxic reaction to specifically mold, which is why it's really hard when you're going to a specialist, because all they're looking at is one organ system. And what it takes is to take someone who is willing to look a step back and say, look at all of these issues that are going on. Maybe we should actually start to investigate the possibility of systemic inflammation that's actually caused by a mycotoxin. So chronic mold symptoms. I want you guys to pay attention to this. Guys, please share this video too if you know someone who is actually like this. Joint pain. So low hormones. Doc, you got to balance my hormones. Remember, these are all symptoms of immune system issues. Low hormones, low energy, GI issues, poor sleep, weight loss resistance. If you do just basic lab work and you chronically have a low glomerular filtration rate, yes, it can be caused by other things, but actually a mycotoxin can also cause a lot of kidney inflammation as well, or excessive thirst or urination. Now, if you have some of those symptoms, is it guaranteed that you have mold? No, because frequent urination can actually be for men a prostate issue, okay? Weight loss resistance can actually just be because you are consuming way too much sugar and you're insulin resistant. Weight loss resistance can also be because you are menopausal. Your hormones are actually low for other reasons, and your body is actually trying to store fat in order to try to get your estrogen levels back up. So poor sleep, GI issues. So when you look at all of these, there's other reasons just for mold, but I want you guys to understand is usually when people are really getting absolutely hammered by a mycotoxin, they will have all of these things going on at the same time, which is why it's so hard for people to actually start to figure out. So where can people actually, let's see if we can make this maybe a little bit more simple, because I always try to make things as simple as possible, sometimes to my detriment, because people will come back and think, that's the only thing that you know? Man, you're explaining it way too simple. I'm trying to explain this as simple as possible to you guys so that you can understand it, you can start putting the pieces together. So where are you going to have mold exposure? And again, we're talking about water damage mold, but other types of mold too, guys. So watch. where you can do is if you've had any kind of flooding. So guys, I'm going to probably tell you that, prayers go to, people that are in Florida that were devastated by the hurricane, but there's going to be a lot of problems with mold. In fact, a lot of those houses that have been flooded should probably actually just be completely demolished because they have been flooded. Here in Illinois, you can experience flooding too, and it's going to be water damage within the basement, specifically if you have a finished basement and it's got carpeting and it's got drywall down there, because that is actually where mold can continue to grow underneath the surface and be naked to the visible eye. So it can be flooding, usually around here it's going to be flooding within the basement. It can also be due to water leaks, okay? And this can be water leaks in the attic. This can be water leaks within the plumbing system behind the walls. This can be water leaks underneath the sinks. So it can also be water leaks that are coming in through moisture and rain coming through old windows as well. You can get a lot of mold that grows in between the windows as those windows start to decay, the wood actually breaks down, or they start to shrink a little bit. It can also be due to having high humidity in a house. So this is why you should not have a high humidity in the house because actually you can get mold that can grow on certain things when it has a high amount of moisture. That's why you should have a humidifier on your HVAC system, and you should actually keep it below 70% humidity. Also, you can get mold that's going to grow in within your heating, ventilation, and cooling system, otherwise known as your HVAC. So if you have a dirty HVAC system, you're not changing your furnace filters, you're getting a lot of dust that's going to be in the heating and ventilation and cooling system. And then on top of that, during the summer months, where that can actually start to sweat, you have the dust, you have the moisture, and then that can also be able to carry mold around. And then you turn your air conditioner or heating unit on and you're blowing it like basically systemically all over the house. But what's interesting too is you can actually test for the type of exposure that you're having. And yes, you can actually have molds that are present in foods. This can be in a lot of grains. It can be like things like oats. It can also be, guys, in your coffee. It can also be in nuts as well. If you look at peanuts, probably some of the highest amount of mycotoxins are actually going to be on peanuts. But coffee, guys, this is why you can have mold actually in coffee, which is why getting your coffee organic can help quite a bit. It's one of the reasons why I don't really drink coffee as well. So you can have it from buildings. You can also have it from foods, but there's a way to test how to know what type of mold it is to see actually how you are excreting it, whether it's coming from foods or whether it's actually coming from molds that are due to water damage, specifically within buildings. Okay. Now, this right here people will always say, yeah, that's just a made-up thing. Fibromyalgia is a made-up thing. Mold exposure in a building, that's a made-up thing. And the reason why is that there's a lot of healthcare people who, if they don't understand how it works, they don't understand the mechanisms of it, and they don't understand physiology, they just say it's all in your head, it's just something that is actually made up. Guys, you can provide a physiological rationale when it comes to fibromyalgia. You can have a physiological rationale when it comes to mold. And guys, if people are poo-pooing this whole idea, please find someone who knows a little bit more about physiology and is willing to actually look and investigate. Guys, I'll tell you something. I don't like handling mold in patients because it becomes a lot harder and it becomes a lot more in depth, but I actually do it based on necessity so that a person can actually get well. My passion is actually working with men and helping them to get their hormones back and get their mojo back and to help them with blood sugar, help them lose weight, and help them become strong, lean, and ripped again. That's what brings me a lot of joy, but there's also a lot of people who need help, specifically when it comes to mold as well. So this comes from PubMed in the Indian Journal of Occupational Environmental Medicine, 2008. So this is not something that's new. The title of the article is actually called The Sick Building Syndrome. Okay? The sick building syndrome comprises of various non-specific symptoms that occur in occupants of a building. The feeling of ill health increases sickness absenteeism and causes a decreased productivity of the workers, as the syndrome is increasingly becoming a major occupational hazard. The cause management and prevention of this condition have been discussed in this article. They call it sick building syndrome, and it's gaining more and more traction even since 2008. And in fact, there's a wonderful MD, I don't know if she has since passed, Doris Rapp, R-A-P-P M-D, and she talked about sick building syndrome, and she said, guys, one of the biggest areas of sick building syndrome that is affecting people is actually within our school system. Interesting. So, and she says that literally 50% of schools would be considered sick building syndrome with a lot of toxic mold, and that it may explain why your kid might be sick during the school year. You send them back home and they do a whole heck of a lot better, because remember, mold causes a systemic reaction. It's not just I have asthma or I have a stuffy nose. It can now become systemic with chronic prolonged exposure as well. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey. Stick with me. Again, guys, please share this video. Of a woman who actually came in, and here's what's interesting, because guys, if I would have looked at this as a protocol, if I would have looked at this as some kind of if this then do this, if this then do this, if this then do this, which is kind of how they do today in medicine. High cholesterol, give them a statin drug. If you're not feeling down, give them an antidepressant. High blood pressure, give them some kind of blood pressure reducing calcium channel blocker, ACE2 inhibitor, whatever. Or if they have problems with joint pain, give them a corticosteroid, and it's just a this for that approach. Very easy, to do that. They'll run maybe further tests, but again, the answer is always just take more meds. We'll find a different med. That one doesn't work. Maybe we'll do something different. But again, it's just suppression of symptoms with chemistry. And it's not actually getting a person well, getting a person whole, and helping them to be able to heal and express their health and life to the fullest of their capacity. So this person came in, and you'll actually see one of the things that we will ask on their initial paperwork is, hey, what are some of the problems that you have coming in? And please let us know in order of importance that you would like us to address. Well, when this woman actually came in, she said, I have rheumatoid arthritis since 2001 for the last 21 years. I experience symptoms every single day, and I also have absolutely zero energy every day. And she said this, here is why I came in today. I would like to reverse rheumatoid arthritis. I want to get rid of inflammation in the body. I have a lot of inflammation in my tendons. My adrenal glands don't really work anymore because I've been on prednisone for 20 years, and I also have high blood pressure. Guys, if you actually understood what prednisone does and how it will shut down the adrenal glands, why she hasn't had a menstrual cycle or hasn't been able to get pregnant, and also a reason why she has high blood pressure, because you give a person prednisone, and it's basically a stress hormone that suppresses the immune system and puts you in chronic fight or flight. So she said, I have no energy and I have rheumatoid arthritis. So I said, okay, I'm looking at your labs. It doesn't even look like you do have rheumatoid arthritis. But if you do, let's go ahead and do some lab work and look and see if you have some specific types of autoantibodies that are involved with different types of autoimmune reactions. We'll screen you for 40 and we'll see what's going on. We get the test results back, and she has no autoimmunity whatsoever. Zero. So we screen for the top 40 and doesn't have any autoantibodies to everything. Not for the thyroid, not for rheumatoid arthritis, not for scleroderma, not for any of these lupus, none of these things. And I said, there's no autoimmunity that's going on. There's got to be something else. There's got to be something different. And so I asked her, I said, if there's no autoimmunity, yet you continue to stay chronically inflamed so much that you are on prednisone for the last 20 years, and I asked her, I said, have you, that you know of, are you currently being exposed to mold? She said, well, we did have some flooding. We fixed it. We remediated it. And I said, all right, but you're still sick. I said, go back in your past. Had you ever had any exposure to mold? She said, oh, yeah. Now that I think about it, the house that I lived in, we could see it crawling along the ceiling because there had been such terrible water damage. And I said, well, when did you first notice it? And she said, at about 18. And I said, when were you diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis? And she said, about the same time. And I said, okay, now tell me about what's going on with your family. And every single one of her siblings are sick with chronic inflammatory conditions that are going on that have all been given the diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. And here's the thing, they all think it's genetic. And because they all think it's genetic, because the doctor didn't want to investigate and look deeper, they're all being prescribed medications that will do nothing to move their health forward. And because they think it's genetic, they think that there's nothing that they can do, and they will not continue to investigate further. But they are all sick with autoimmune-like conditions, but they are all having the symptoms of chronic mold exposure and the inability to be able to remove mycotoxins from the body. So, because when you look at this, guys, this is actually a Dutch test. So we said, okay, the reason why we did a Dutch test is we want to look at her adrenal function. And so you can see like her adrenal function was absolutely at 0, which makes sense being on prednisone for such a long period of time. But you actually can see that very low testosterone, low DHEA, which is coming from the adrenal glands, very low progesterone, and you can actually see she does have some estradiol production, but anything that's contributing from the adrenal glands is absolutely tanked. Most of her estradiol production is actually coming from the ovaries. And so he looked at this, and I'm like, well, this is, why your quote-unquote hormones are tanked. We are not going to give you some kind of bioidentical to try to drive your hormones up when the body says, no, not now, you're sick. We do not want these hormones inside the body, because remember, hormones, they actually respond. They don't cause anything. They are responding to stressors. The stressor that she had was involving with the immune system. So we did a mycotoxin profile on her. This comes from Great Plains Laboratory, and basically what it is, it's a urinalysis, and it actually detects the presence of mycotoxins being excreted from the body. What's interesting is you actually look at this, so negative, 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 and then literally had about 6 times the amount of ochratoxin A, an extremely toxic mycotoxin that will absolutely just hammer the immune system if you do not have the ability to be able to get that out of the body. And so you can see testing positive for mold. Now, we'll continue to test her, but one of the things that we have to do is we have to slowly start removing it from the body. And the reason why is she didn't have the ability to be able to get rid of it on her own. See, with 25% of people, you remove them from the environment and they still do not recover because they cannot produce an antibody response to the mycotoxin so that it can be inactivated by the immune system and harmlessly excreted from the body. So this is actually her with no exposure. How do we know that she is healing? Well, when we start retesting this, we want to see lower excretion of that mycotoxin as time goes on, provided that she doesn't have a consistent exposure to it in her environment at the present time. So guys, how do you start to handle this? And let me give you the first steps, because I know a lot of you are going to ask, how do you remove it from the body? Guys, actually what you do determines on the type of mold. Type of binders that you use is determined on the type of mold. Type of inflammatory responses going on will determine on what you need to do, how quickly you need to remove it. But guys, if you are doing anything right to stimulate your liver to do it, you will absolutely get devastated. And the reason why is because you think of low hormones, holy cow, and how that will devastate the body. So you have to do it really very slowly, and you also have to start to open up kind of all the detox channels in the body, which is why far infrared sauna can be a huge game changer for these people. So if you suspect that you are having issues with mold, the first thing that I would actually do is test your environment for current exposure. Where do you think you're having the exposure at? Is it at work? Is it at school? Or is it at home? You can actually go online, Google Ermey, E-R-M-I, and you can get the Ermey test shipped from a bunch of different companies. It's the same test. You can get it shipped to your house with directions on how to do it. So go ahead and test for current exposure. So if it comes back and it's positive, and it may be, we just had someone do an Ermey test, and she had actually had to move out of her old house, moved in a new one, tested that for mold, and her Ermey test came back at 18. And when she got it back, she said, Dr. Nate, I already called the mold remediation, and we got to get it, because she had been testing, and could not get better, could not understand why she had so many different issues that are going on. And again, all of these different things is very hard to pinpoint because, gastrointestinal issues, joint pain, poor sleep, brain fog, having kidney issues. having terrible hormones, low adrenal function. All of that is a inflammatory response. It's the body responding to specifically the mycotoxin. So the next thing is you got to remediate and protect your mucous membrane specifically while you are waiting for remediation to take place. Some people, they have to get completely out of the environment. But again, you breathe in the mold mostly through the nose, which is why actually protecting the mucous membranes, with things like ion nasal or also colloidal silver sprayed into the actual nasal sinuses. This can actually help to protect the sinuses, kill off any kind of mold spores, but also start to reduce, because sometimes you can actually have mold growing within the sinus cavity as well. But as far as removing it from the body, it would be like trying to bail out your boat when you have 4 holes at the bottom of the boat. It's not going to do a whole lot until you actually stop being exposed to it. So for a lot of people, I say 75%, that they do this, they remediate and they find the cause. For 75%, they're actually going to recover. They're going to stop having an inflammatory response. They're going to start doing better. But then there's the 25%. So the 25% who don't recover, they actually have a genetic issue known as HLA-DRDQ mutation, human leukocytic antigen. And so basically, these people have a really, really hard time, not only with mold, but with other things as well, as far as being able to remove it from the immune system, which is actually why you have to help the liver to be able to bind these things and be able to remove them from the body very, very slowly. So, once that happens, then you can do mycotoxin testing, like I showed you before. A good thing to do, if you don't want to invest in doing a mycotoxin test, is actually do an online VCS test, visual contrast sensitivity. I spelled that wrong, I apologize. And this is actually something that you can now do actually online on a computer screen. It's a website called vcstest.com, for example, and you can actually pre-purchase like 10 tests. And usually we'll have people do that because I said, well, every single 4 to 6 to 8 weeks that I'm going to be meeting with you, just go ahead and do another VCS test and look for a better perfusion of the optic nerve, because mold and inflammation will cause poor perfusion of the optic nerve, which will actually start to change your visual contrast sensitivity. So we'll actually use this and do this every 3 to 4 months. But in the meantime, in between, we'll actually do this and just see how the body is actually adapting to it. And then the last thing is then you have to be able to detox from the mold, and a lot of that is dependent on testing. Okay, so it's going to be dependent on the type of mycotoxin that's involved, the person's ability to be able to get rid of it on themselves, and this is why, guys, there is a lot of different things that you have to do, and you also have to do it within the right order. But sometimes you have to actually support the gastrointestinal system because it's been wrecked. So there's just a lot of different things that have going on, which is why I'm not even going to attempt to try to talk to you guys about mold detox and specifically what you have to do. But it's based on testing, and when you know that you don't need to do it anymore, you have to do retesting. I will tell you this, but for those 25% of people, who's usually what I'm dealing with and working with, I tell them, I say, you are going to have a journey of about 1.5 to 2 years, and that's clinically just about how long. But we have had wonderful recoveries from mold, people who literally had such terrible low hormones, joint pain, gastrointestinal system issues, to the point where they can actually be working out 3 to 4 times per week, no longer have immunosuppression and things like that. And it's just a wonderful story to be able to help those people get their lives back. But guys, it's not easy, and it's not just a linear path. Guys, most of your healing does not follow a linear path. It's not like, well, I'm going to get this much better at 4 weeks, this much better at 8, this much better. It goes up and down. But if you look at the trajectory over the course of a year, you're going to say, I'm better. But you're going to have some good days and you're going to have some bad days as well. So the biggest thing that people with mold toxicity, the biggest thing that they have, specifically people who can't actually get the toxicity, the mycotoxin out of the body, their biggest thing is that those people who can actually can have a T cell response, but the people who can't are constantly having what you would know as an innate immune system response, which causes a massive amount of inflammation. So that's why they are so massively inflamed all the time, because they cannot rely on those sniper-specific cells that can actually destroy and inactivate and tag those certain toxins and get removed from the body, which means that they're always having a tissue damage response all the time, and it never ends, which is why they have so much systemic inflammation that's going on. Hopefully, guys, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to leave you guys with this. Here's why you are sick. Number one reason is because there's something involving your immune system. And when it involves the immune system, the body's just doing exactly what it is, and there's an inflammatory response. That's why every 3 weeks we talk about inflammation at our office, because once you understand the role of inflammation and how it is they spark in every single chronic degenerative disease, why is the link to pain, why is the link to your hormones, why is the link to autoimmunity, why is the link to cancer, why is the link to infertility, you got to understand, you got to take the immune system out, or you got to find what is actually causing the inflammatory response. And then the second thing, ladies, is actually stress. Because when you see the hormone response to chronic unrelenting stress, you will understand what it does to your hormones, to your immune system, to the gastrointestinal system, to the heart, to the blood vessels, to everything systemically inside of the body. And guys, if you would whittle it down, is that if you can know where your sources of inflammation are and you can get a handle on the stress response, man, people would be able to recover so much easier, because there is a wonderful healing ability of the body. It will always be able to heal itself, and if it can't, because there is too much things that are overburdening the immune system, or there's too much stress, then what happens is the body goes into an adaptation. Body will start to adapt to help you live as long as possible, but in that process, there will be disease that develops. That disease is not a curse, it's a blessing, because if it had not adapted into that, you would have died a lot sooner. Once you start looking at that from a different perspective, then you will understand that the body never makes mistakes. It's just trying to help you adapt so that you can live as long as possible. Someone asked me the other day, Doc, what is the hardest thing, the hardest condition that you have had to take care of? Is it cancer? Is it mold? What is it? And I said, the hardest thing to take care of has nothing to do with a condition, and it has to do with the person. And that's why I will say this. There are no incurable illnesses. That's the good news, guys. But the bad news is that there's just incurable people. Oh, that is so true. Not incurable illnesses, just incurable people. And people who refuse to do what's necessary, the people who blame, the people who complain will always stay the same. And it doesn't matter what you tell them to do, they will always have something negative about why they are sick. And in fact, guys, the people who get the most healing are the people who are the most coachable, the people who are thirsty to learn, and the people who say, do this, and the next day that they've already incorporated it. There are no incurable illnesses, guys. There's just incurable people. And that's why you have to ask yourself, am I a coachable person to work on getting my health back? There are no incurable illnesses, just incurable people. So guys, if you are still with me and still watching, thank you so much for watching all the way through. And I want to remind you, from the Chicagoland area, make immune system strong again. We're going to be doing this talk on Saturday, October 7th at 10 o'clock until noon. We're going to talk about the immune system using medical textbook of physiology, how the immune system works, how you build a strong immune system response. We're going to help you see the immune system from a different perspective. And then we're actually going to talk about this whole pandemic and why the gene therapeutics were an absolute disaster using actually research. I'll explain to you why, and I'll also explain to you guys why the only reason why we don't have all of these draconian measures here is because there was no science behind it, and that people actually stood up for their constitutional freedoms and stood up and said, I will not tolerate this anymore. And I am actually one of them. And the only reason why these were taken away had nothing to do with science, and it had to do with the constitutionality of it. And I'm going to show you that, guys, and this is going to be a huge eye-opener for you. Guys, you have more power than you know if you are willing to stand up, if you're willing to take the slings and arrows, if you're willing to take the hits, and if you are willing to say, you know what, I don't care what people think, is that this is right and I will stand firm no matter what happens as a consequence. Because at the end of the night, you always have the pillow test. When you lay your head down on the pillow, you have to ask yourself, did I do my best? Did I stand up for what is right? And did I not do things that were expedient, but I did what was right? And when you walk away from this, I guarantee you guys that you're going to be a different person, not only from your health, but also in your confidence, in the body's ability to be able to heal on its own. So guys, again, please share this video. I always appreciate it. Make sure that you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. And guys, I hope you have an awesome night. I'm actually going to jump on Wednesday with some more things as well, just briefly. So guys, be well, be blessed. Remember who you are.